the crypto industry. The U.S. Treasury also announced last week new tax reporting rules for digital coins. And volatility continues to roil the crypto market. Ethereum and Bitcoin are both edging up at the moment. Well, China shares managed to close in positive territory today, supported by gains for financial firms. But there's still some caution as investors await key U.S. inflation data out later this week. The Hang Seng though ended the session in the red, down by slightly more than 0.1%. The digital currency and blockchain-related counters are under pressure. Hong Kong-listed OKG Tech, an affiliate of crypto exchange OKCoin, tumbled almost 15% this session, and Huobi Tech, an affiliate of crypto exchange operator Huobi and BC Tech Group, down by more than 20%. Well, Japanese shares ended higher with a sentiment boosted by U.S. factory activity, which was out last Friday. But losses in chip makers weighed on the Kospi, which ended down by almost 0.4%. Moving on, South Korea's central bank is seeking a tech supplier to build a pilot platform for a digital currency. The move will help Bank of Korea look into the practicalities of launching a central bank digital currency in a test environment. There will be simulations of commercial banks and retail outlets, with trials to include payment via mobile phones and fund transferring. The pilot program will run from August to December and may be expanded into a second phase next year. The central bank says it's taking steps to prepare for changes in the payment settlement system, with the share of cash transactions seeing a significant decrease. A Bank of Korea is not alone in trying to develop a central bank-backed digital currency. There are similar moves by central banks from China, Britain and Sweden to modernize their financial systems. Consumer prices continue to push ahead in Singapore, with core inflation rising 0.6% in April compared to a year ago. And that's the third straight month of increase. The core inflation excludes private road transport and accommodation costs. Now, if you include those, the headline consumer price index climbed by 2.1% on year. And that's the fastest pace in almost 7 years, driven mainly by a sharp increase in car prices. Consumers were also paying more for household durables and food. Experts say Singaporeans may expect higher costs as the COVID-19 situation in the region worsens, leading to a supply disruption. That's coupled with the rise in COVID-19 infections locally and a potential tightening of restrictions.
If they have to continue to ensure restriction, etc., then they may see some of the costs being passed on to the consumer. But again, as I say, that's on the assumption that they don't get further assistance. I think after 1 year, government are quite quick in terms of finding out who are the industry most affected, who needs help and who doesn't. So we are able to calibrate response far more quickly this time around. So to you and I as consumer, maybe the impact will be far less.
Well, that's it for business. Back to you, Otelli.
Thanks, Eugenia. Australia's Victoria State has reported 4 new COVID-19 infections, all in the city of Melbourne. This is the state's first cases of community transmission in nearly 3 months. The new infections have sparked a search for the source of the outbreak. Well, authorities were alerted to the unfolding cluster after a man tested positive for the virus after developing symptoms last week. Victoria's Chief Health Officer says the man is carrying a high viral load and is likely to be quite infectious. A woman and a preschool child living with him have since tested positive. A male relative from a separate household has also tested positive. Other family members among the 2 households are in isolation and have so far tested negative.
We all have our role to play here, and we all need to step up and do what we can to keep ourselves safe, our families safe and our community safe, particularly as we enter the high-risk period of winter. This is not a time to be complacent.
Well, contact tracers are investigating a potential link between the new cases and one identified earlier this month, with links to a quarantine hotel.
Given the proximity of the gentleman from early May who returned from hotel quarantine in Adelaide, who lives in that city, we don't rule out the prospect that there is a link. The dates don't line up immediately, so we can't rule out that there's a missing link out there.
Japan has opened its first mass vaccination centres in a bid to boost a sluggish coronavirus inoculation drive. The country is battling an infection surge just 2 months before the Tokyo Olympics. The two military-run centres in Tokyo and Osaka will administer thousands of shots daily.
Doctors in Japan's second-largest city say they're struggling to cope with an influx of COVID-19 patients. Hospitals in Osaka are running out of beds and ventilators as exhausted medical teams warn of a system collapse. The city is bearing the brunt of Japan's fourth wave, accounting for a third of the nation's death toll in May. Just 14% of the prefecture's COVID-19 patients have been hospitalised, leaving the majority to fend for themselves. Doctors are now warning of an impending disaster if the Olympic Games go ahead in July. Japan has one of the lowest vaccination rates of any major developed nation. Only about half of the country's medical staff have completed inoculations. Caring for critically ill patients in the face of infection risk has taken a serious toll on staff. Some have been doing hundreds of hours of overtime for a year. Japan's surge in COVID cases is being driven in part by the UK variant of the virus, which is considerably more infectious. In the week leading up to Thursday, there were some 3,900 reported new infections. That represents a more than 5-fold jump over the corresponding period 3 months ago. Much of Japan, including Tokyo, is under a state of emergency, which is suspected to be extended to June. On Monday, Japan opened its first major inoculation centres in Tokyo and Osaka, as it races to vaccinate most of its elderly population before the start of the Olympics.
オリンピック開催までに8割か9割ぐらいやっとけばスムーズにオリンピックできると思うんですよ。で、いろんな社会生活と経済の影響がだんだん早く政策的に早くやっておいた方が安心できるわけですよ。で、そういうところの行政のね、いつもだけどそういうなんていうか後手後手というかね、で戦略的にできないのかなっては思いますね。
Coming up on Asia Now, the world has not been the same since the pandemic started, but how much more can people take? Plus, businesses in Hong Kong hope the city's vaccination drive will give them a much-needed shot in the arm.
CNA Leadership Summit. Presenting partner, Daikin.
The human cost of the climate crisis will become even greater.
A timely conversation on one of the biggest challenges facing the world today.
Climate change will affect every single person. A leadership summit is imperative.
In order to bring various leaders together to start thinking about sustainability.
Observing stringent safety measures, business leaders and decision makers gathered physically and virtually to discuss collective actions for a green recovery.
The message delivered was one of hope, that there are many solutions out there for climate change.
A big thank you to all the panellists and participants at this year's CNA Leadership Summit. Organised by MediaCorp. Official car partner, BMW. Official partner, RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. top stories in Asia.
A quicker, portable way of testing for COVID-19 in just 5 minutes.
To breaking news in the US and Europe.
US President-elect Joe Biden is set to formally introduce his top economic